And I have a lot of them, and I know everybody else does too. In your drawers, you might have some saved wool socks because 90% of the sock is still good. There's one little small hole that can be really easily repaired, and I'm going to show you how to repair your wool sock today with a needle felting tool and wool. And it really only takes a couple minutes. It's kind of amazing how easy it can be done. And there's an example of a couple wool socks that I have worn for a long time, repaired, and put them in the wash, and they still are good. So you can see that you can fix any kind of wool socks. And different types of wool will work too. So if you have things around the house, you can make use of them. But what you do need is a needle felting tool. It has these barbs on it. You can't really see that, but if you can buy them at sometimes quilting stores, fabric stores have them nowadays online. Northhouse Folk School will send you a kit that I make up for easy use with directions and wool and needles. But this tool is, I call it my paintbrush in the world of felting. I didn't introduce myself. Anyway, my name's Elise, and I'm here to teach mending, which I am calling menditation. And menditation, I'm kind of starting over again, but menditation, I call it that because you have to be completely focused. When you use this needle and you're poking it into something, which is your wool sock, you have to be quite focused. You're not going to be chatting or watching a movie most likely while you're doing this. So menditation, it's a very relaxing thing to do.
All right, Elise, keep it up. I just realized that this is turned the wrong way.
Okay, I thought so. So I'm just going to begin. I'm going to first do a demonstration of the mending. We're craftspeople. We're not technicians. Christine, my studio mate, is helping me with this, and we'll hopefully.
Oh yeah, we got thumbs up now.
Good. So, the first thing you want to do, thinking about repairing a sock, is to evaluate the sock. You got to assess whether it's worth doing. And so here's a sock that it has a hole here and a hole, it's thin here. And if the heel was bad too, I'd say toss it or compost it. But if it's got just a couple small holes, it is worth repairing, and it's quite easy. So I'm going to take one sock and show you how easy it is to do. So here's the sock, and the bad place is just right there in the heel. And this sock has got some acrylic polyester in it, so it's a little bit stiffer than some other socks. Are quite much softer and easier to knit felt, but this will be just fine. It'll work. So all it takes is a needle and some wool, and I am going to roll up one sock, and that's going to be kind of my padding to go under the sock. I actually like to put it inside the sock, because what you're going to do is put wool on both sides of the sock, because the wool, this new wool that you felt onto the sock, will not actually adhere to the woven material, but the wool will work through this as a medium, and a layer from this side and a layer from the other side will bond together with needle felting and then wet felting. So I have a hole about that big, and I want to make it flat and smooth so you don't have bumps on the bottom of your feet. So I'm kind of taking, this is called batting, and it's all tangled wool, so it's nice that I can just kind of pull it out in little sections and layer it in thin layers, overlapping. And you want to go over the section that is a hole, because you want to go beyond the hole and the weak points. And then this needle, magic needle, I call it a paintbrush in my world of felting, because you can really do details with it, but you also can just make wool grab other wool. Kind of just up and down. Move it like a sewing machine, sort of. And you can kind of direct where the wool is going to be. And if I were to count the number of times I did this, which I don't really, I just look for it beginning to bond. But if you're a counter and you want to know, I'd say probably at least 200 of these stabs here. This is sort of the meditation part, because it's just repetitive. Just keep on doing it till it seems to be felt. And you can see how it's adhering now. I can pull it out still, but it's starting to really stick. So it's bonding to the sock. And then once I have high speed felting, once I have that done, I'm going to turn the sock inside out.
Ooh, we got a couple questions, Elise.
Okay.
Question 1. How is batting different from roving?
Oh yeah. I'm going to get to that. If you can hold on.
All right.
Because you could use batting or roving, and right now batting is just an easy thing to begin with. It's easier than roving, actually, to use, and I will show that to you in a minute. So I have one side done, and now I'm going to put my padding, the other sock, back inside, under the hole. And think about trying to make the patch on that side, other side, match the patch on this side. And it can't be too thick, because otherwise you're going to cause acupuncture pressure points and it'll be annoying. So try to make it a smooth, thin layer.
Where can one get wool batting? Is another question.
Yeah, lots of places. North House Folk School, I'd be happy to say that they have a great selection of batting there, and it's called C1 Pelsu, and it comes from Norway, which is, they have done a great job of combining breeds of sheep to make it really fast to felt, strong, really durable felting. They have other wool there too, in little bags, which is really great. A bunch of different colors. I also sell these little felting kits, promo. But it has directions, has 2 needles, and has an ounce of wool. And it's a variety of wool colors, so you can be creative with this also. All right, that feels pretty good. That's about it. That's all I need to do in preparation for that's the dry part of felting. I could spend more time on that and make it more durable, but right now what I want to do, would I spend more time to make it more durable? Yes, I would. But for this class, little workshop, I'm going to keep on going, except I just pulled it out, so I want to do a little I turn it around, and I want to do a little bit more felting on this side before I begin to wet felt.
Got another question. How long does this process take?
I would say 5 minutes. Christine, who's done it, who is not a felter, but she might say it takes 20 minutes.
Or longer.
How do you, yeah. So I think it takes, if you have some practice at it, I would say 5 minutes. No, that feels good. Okay. Now I'll pull this out, kind of gently pull it off. So now it feels like it's pretty secure there. Now I'm going to wet felt it. And that's going to be the bonding, permanent bonding of the fiber. So what you're doing, you first needle felting dry, and then to bond it securely, and you can then wash them in the washing machine or whatever you do with them, it won't come apart. So after I do this process, I'm going to go back and talk more about wool and other options and a bunch of different things you could needle felt. But for now, this section is just about how to.
There's another question. What are you using inside the sock?
Yeah, for ease, another sock rolled up. The other sock is the padding, because you don't want to hold on to your sock in your hand, of course, because it creates a lot of pain. I like to make a a pad, which is just wool blankets that are layered up and then wet felted the surface around that, which is pretty sweet. So when you do larger things, I have big pads, little pads, but for this purpose, just the sock works pretty well. So now, I'm going to take warm water. And if you don't know about wet felting, what's going to happen is the fibers are going to open up. They have these scales on their surface, microscopic, but when you add warm water, they kind of relax. And then when you agitate them and add soap, they kind of wiggle around. And then those scales will bond with their neighbors. And they'll kind of grab each other, and they'll actually close on each other. And that makes this really, like this is example, this has been wet felted. It's really durable. It's been wet felted and bonded well. So you can't undo something once it's wet felted. So here I am going to add a little bit of water, and I'm going to add some soap to help those fibers wiggle around. You can put soap in the water. Any kind of soap really works. And I'm going to really gently begin to rub that surface. And at first you are just surface rubbing one side, and then I'll rub the other side after this side is a bit flattened out and smooth.
Elise, would this work on a sweater?
Yeah, work on a sweater, work on hats. It would work on a wool blazer. Yeah, you can repair most things that are wool. Even things that are not wool, you could repair. I've repaired cotton socks. I just think they're not worth doing. But you know, wool socks are pretty expensive, so you don't really want to pass them into the waste stream with just a small hole. So here now I'm going to wet the other side. And I've got soap on my hands. And I'll spend a minute doing this probably. And that will be it. That's my one sock done. Now, of course, you could add decorations. All right, I've got a smiley face in the bottom of my sock. I like to think of taking somebody's socks out of their drawer and repairing them for them and surprising them with little colorful swatches on them. And now I can be more aggressive. The fibers have begun to bond. So I'm going to add more soap, be more aggressive, rubbing harder. At first I was really, really gentle. Okay.
Can you repair jeans with felting?
No, I never have. It would break the needles. There are needle felting machines that could probably do that. But with these really fragile needles, I kind of don't think. It's probably possible. Yeah. But
We got another good question.
yeah.
How do you prevent shrinking of the whole sock with this process?
It actually, for this amount of pressure, the sock is not going to shrink. Now, I'm a person that throws my socks in the dryer and then washes it in the dryer, so. But this would not shrink your sock, this amount of agitation. So that's about it. I feel pretty good about that. I have before taken this, just done the needle felting, gotten the sock wet and soapy, put on my running shoes, first a plastic bag, and then my running shoes, and gone running. So agitation, while you're running, you're agitating your little patch into your sock.
How well would it work to wet felt finger holes on wool mittens?
Yeah, it works really well. Gloves are more difficult, but it also does work. I don't have an example of that, but anything that has a small hole and there's a weave around it, you can repair those things. Let me talk a little bit about wool variety. Somebody asked about merino, and I have a few examples of wool here that I'll share with you. And maybe we'll go back to the sock in a minute, but if people have more questions about sock repair. So wool roving, it's long lengths, and it breaks. You can try to pull it apart like this, and it won't. It's pretty durable, strong, but it has a natural breaking point, the length of the fiber. So wool roving can be used, and this is merino, which is a very soft wool. So if you're making clothing or things next to your skin, you want to use merino. But the downside of merino on the bottom of a sock is that it is not as durable as other wools. It doesn't have as much grab. It tends to pill up over time and not be really strong. So it's good for some things, but not all things. But if you if you happen to have roving at home and want to use it, the way you would lay it out over a hole, let me use this as an example. There's already a patch on it, but you can see. You would take it from the very end you've got this fat part of your thumb and 3 fingers. Try to pull it out a little thin swatches. And then do it again and cross hatch them back and forth. And that's probably about enough right there. And then I would needle felt that in place. It's just, you can see it is a little bit more difficult to work with. A little bit more airy, but it will work. So if you had a fine cashmere sweater that you wanted to repair, you might want to use merino because it might have a similar texture to that cashmere or angora. Whereas a wool sock will do quite well with some of this more rugged wool, like batting. Batting is different than roving. It's not linear. It is structured, laid out, and has been needle felted by a machine most likely. And so the fibers are all tangled up. So when you lay it out, it's already all these directions. You just take out a swatch and put it down, and there's your patch. So that's about how much I use for a patch, unless there's one big hole someplace. I'll add a bit more wool where that hole is. And quilting, quilting stores they sell large sections of bats, and that would work just fine. They're usually a mixture of wool, and you'd have no idea what kind of wool is in it. But most likely it will needle felt and wet felt. And I guess you can try it on your sock, and if it doesn't work, just pull it out and try something else.
Got a couple of questions, Elise.
Great.
How does the needle felting compare to like darning or duplicate stitch or?
Yeah, I know I brought this egg here just to kind of remind people of this is what we used to do when we were repairing socks. And some people still do. It's sort of fallen. I don't know many people who darn their socks. But you had an egg and you had the needle and yarn. And how does it compare? I think one of the downsides, somebody gave me all their darn socks here as an example, is that you have a knot at both ends. And sometimes those knots are in bad places and they affect your step. With the needle felting, you don't have any of that. It's just a completely smooth patch. And I like that you can really control the needle felting, what size it is, and you could put more wool where it's really weak and less wool where it has more structure. So you can kind of vary the amount of wool you put down. I think it's quicker, but I'm not much of a darner, so I don't know. I don't have the experience. Yeah, good question.
Would a felter have any need for felted boot liners? Valerie Aerosmith asked that.
Have a need for boot liners? Who doesn't need boot liners in Minnesota? Yeah. But I don't know what that question means. Yeah.
So yes.
Yes.
And then maybe at the end we could do a quick review of all the steps because some people joined in late and just want to see
that sounds great. Yep.
The full deal.
Yep. So before I continue on to the repeat, how's our time?
I don't know.
Okay.
Can't see the clock.
Hasn't been that long, I don't think. But I had brought a variety of socks because you can needle felt on all sorts of socks. This kind of version, the old rag wool socks, the smart wool, really thin merino socks. They all will take the wool as long as you put wool on both sides because you're attaching the wool to new wool.
Clarification, could one recycle the felted liner for other felt projects?
Oh, it would be a really great base to do needle felting on top of. Cut it into shapes because it has nice structure. But you couldn't tear it apart because that wool has been completely bonded through a wet felting process. That's what makes it so strong. So, or cut them up and make pads, foot pads. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Nowadays the felt liners, they're no longer fully wool. They're a combination of polyester or other materials. And I think the all wool probably is warmer than the new ones, but they're hard to find. So here's an example of this one. This sock has been put through the washer and dryer. You can kind of tell that the patch has shrunk and kind of pulled in together, which is one reason why you don't want to add too much wool in your patch, because you don't want it to be too thick. I want to show you a few of my tools that I use when I am felting. I mean, the basic tool is the needle felting tool. That's what I usually use as a single tool. And they come in different gauges for coarse wool and for fine wool. And I tend to use a number 38, just kind of the general needle. I also make little mini corkscrew. You can put 2 or 3 needles in them. You can buy multi-needle tools. Make use out of those old Tinker toys with just a bolt in the middle and a few needles added. Drill through there, and makes it a pretty great multi-needle punch. So I'm going to repeat the process of repairing a sock. Let's see if I have one here. So again, take a look at the sock and see if the whole bottom, like here, this one is pretty bad. I'd say it's weak, really thin here and all through the toes. That might be, do something else with that sock. It's possible. I have before put a whole felted pad on the bottom of a sock, which is pretty sweet. But is it worth the work? I will repair that one just because it's here. I'm going to take that out. So I'm going to roll up one sock. Now if you have an old wool sweater, you can just kind of ball that up and put your sock on top of that too. Just something that's soft that needle can go into and not break. You can either put this balled up thing inside of the sock or just on top of it. So I'm going to get some wool. I'm going to use, this is C1 Pelsu. I do like to use contrasting colors to the sock because then I can see where it goes through the sock. And then the other side, when I put it on the other side, you can really tell where the fibers should be put so they meet. And I don't know, why not have colorful patches on the bottom of your sock?
Yeah, there's a question. How do you felt patterns into wool?
Yeah. That's the magic of this painting. It's a needle felting tool, but I call it a paintbrush. And you can, let me do a little bit of this first. Straight up and down. And watch your fingers. You can kind of, let me pull these out of the way.
And how come the needle felting doesn't go into the balled up sock?
It does, but you just pull it out. And then once you put wool on the other side, you bend it all back together, and that one gets needle felted back into the sock. So whether you put the padding sock in the middle, it will go into that sock and you pull it out, or it's going to go into this other side of the sock and you pull it apart. So either way, it will go all the way through. So I'm kind of pushing the wool from the edges. I can kind of twirl, you know, the spaghetti roll when you used to put spaghetti on your fork, twirl it around. and then push it in. You can kind of control those loosey-goosey fibers on the edges. Okay, so the edges are kind of clear, and then I can go sort of high speed. Just kind of go all around, straight up and down. Now if you wanted to add a design, it's quite easy to do. Let me just take a little bit of blue. And here's just an example of twisting the fibers up in your fingers to create a line. And then start, I don't know if you can see this, start at one edge and just sort of move around. Guide your fiber where you want it to be and put it in place. And then needle felt it in. Sweet thing about it, if you don't like it, you want to rearrange it, just take it out and try it again. But then once you wet felt it, it will be in place, bonded. And of course you can shade colors together by, you can mix colors. And they're quite beautiful because it's kind of a watercolor effect. Once they do needle felt, they blend together really nicely. Yeah, so this is a very purposeful task, repairing the bottoms of your socks, but I do love the art that's
Can you hold that design up for our Instagrammers?
Yes.
Ooh.
Of course, it needs eyes, but but the possibility of colors of wool and a needle and the painting that's possible with needle felting is great. So now this is one side that's been done, and I'm going to flip the sock inside out and then put wool that will meet this on the other side. I wasn't very attentive. I didn't get that part, so I probably, if I weren't on video right now, I'd spend some time in getting wool all around anywhere it's weak. But for right now, I'm just going to finish that patch. All right, so I've got some thin wool. If you roll it up, if you kind of make a ball like that, it just doesn't felt as well. So you kind of want to pull fibers apart. And the thinner the layers, the better. You can kind of just lay them out so they're smooth. All right.
This is a good question. Can you felt superwash sock yarn?
Oh, ha!
Julie says nope.
No, superwash will never shrink. It's got I think it's a thin layer of something on all the fibers that's been added so that the fibers are not being affected by water and soap and heat. So they will never shrink or felt together. Now I don't know if you can needle felt them though. I suppose you probably could because it's not a chemical change. It's actually a structural change. So maybe you could. All right.
Susan, we are needle felting holes in socks.
All right, so there's the other side. So one side's red and one side is green. And I'm going to pull it apart. I'm going to wiggle those fibers apart, check the other side and make sure it's still solid. You can see how the green did come through, which is a good sign actually. That means the needle felting is working and bonding the fibers together. All right, so now I'm going to take the next step and do the wet felting. Okay.
Dale just says hello from the old neighborhood.
Ah, hello. All right, dip it in the water. It should be moist. If the wools are not wet, they won't bond together. So soapy hands or soapy water. And then gently rubbing. And you want to just sort of caress those fibers together, working really gently to begin, encouraging them to stay where you want them. And then once this side is done, a little bit more water. I can tell it's a little bit fluffy still. And I'm going to turn the sock inside out and do this to the other side.
What kind of soap do you use?
My preference is olive oil soap, which is just sort of, it's more gentle on the hands than Dawn or Ivory or something. You can use most anything. You're causing the fibers to be slick, so they move about. And so other fibers will grab other fibers, they wiggle closer and closer together as they bond and they sort of shrink. They really are just, you're agitating all the air out of the fibers because it's just full of lots of air, right? But you want them to be compressed completely and bonded.
We're back to the superwash question. If you're felting the wool patch on each side, wouldn't it work on superwash? So a sock made with superwash.
Oh, the sock.
The sock. Yeah, I didn't get that.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Sweet.
Yes, thank you. That feels good. And I'm going to turn it inside out and do the other side. So yes, you could do this to a lot of things. Your hats have holes. Your jackets have holes. Maybe you just want to add designs to things you have in your life. A boring old sweater. Take some colorful wool and a needle. You don't have to wet felt those things. You can also just needle felt it and then give it a steam iron. That will help secure the fibers. That feels pretty good. Now I can be more aggressive. I can really bond these fibers together. And that's good. Okay. So now I would rinse out the soap and let them dry and call that patch good. And that I have worn the edges. That's a sign of where the wool on this side didn't meet the wool on the other side. So when you needle felt them, be attentive to the two sides matching the patches. What will happen over time is this just might roll up, or I can cut it off, or I could go back and felt it again. But that should last a long time, and sometimes you actually get the same place where you have a hole from before will develop here, and you can patch it again if you wanted to. So your socks are back to 100% good.
2 more questions. Is your needle thinner than a darning needle?
Ooh, yes, it is. And it's a special tool. It's a needle felting tool. So it has smaller barbs on it that cause the fibers to go downward and then pull back upward. So they're invisible to see, but to the touch you can feel. They're like a teeny fish hook, sort of. So that causes the fibers to tangle up.
And then there is a request for you to share your knowledge on how you make felted animals. So I think that should be your next
Yeah.
Instagram live.
That would be a fun one. It would have to be a high-speed film because it takes a long time.
We'll do a time lapse.
Yeah, here's a little one, but this is where you can see I brought a few things just to show. This has been wet felted, so it's super durable. Right. And then this is not wet felted, so it's the beginning of a creature, a finger puppet, but the fibers can be pulled apart. But when you add water and soap and you begin to rub them like we did with a sock, you kind of tell the fibers where to go and you sculpt them, you can define what that shape is, and it becomes durable. So maybe in the future there will be a creature show. And that would be fun. And I don't think I have anything else. Yeah. I hope that you might find some old wool socks in your closet and repair them. If you would like a kit, Woolly Wonder mending kit. It has directions inside, kind of to show you how it's done, with an ounce of wool, so many things in a variety of colors, and 2 needles. And what else?
You can get those at the North House store.
Yeah, yep. And if anybody has a ton of socks that you don't know what to do with, but you can't stand to put them in the dumpster, you can send them to me. Because there's so many people that don't know that wool is important. People who live in Minnesota who wear only cotton. And I think it's really important that everyone has a pair of wool socks. So, like these socks, someday I hope they go to the city, Minneapolis, and are used by somebody. So, yeah. I think that's all for now. Just
All
kind of fun.
right. Thanks, Elise.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Christine.